Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mind the Gap. I'm excited to be joined today by Heather Spyrakis. Heather is an L&D Advisor at UCA, who's got a passion for facilitating learning across leadership and team development. She demonstrates a commitment to continuous development, evidence at UCA through her dedication to nurturing talent and fostering a culture of improvement aligned with the organisation's values, and her professional ethos of empowering others to achieve their full potential. A big welcome. It's great to have you here, Heather. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
I know we've been talking over the last few weeks about this specific topic. I'm really excited to get into it. I think it's something that our customers and people, hopefully, who are listening, are going to be excited to explore with us. So we're going to go into the idea of personal power and the momentum mindset. So that's going to be the core topic for today. But before we do that, I always like to do some quick fire questions, Heather, just to get our brains going and get us started, and also hopefully to pull out some things that may be helpful for our listeners at the start of the call. So, what's the one thing that's consuming lots of your thinking at the moment, Heather?
That's a great question. I'm thinking a lot about psychological safety at the moment, actually,
Okay.
and that's going to be something I sort of reference in a little bit more detail a little bit further on. But yeah, we're helping to create an e-learning module for our staff. So it's just really thinking about whose responsibility is it, what is it, how do we build it, how do we foster it, how do we nurture it, and all of that sort of thing. So it's a really interesting and vast topic, and I think it's something that lots of people are starting to understand or have a really good grasp of, but there's also some people that are like, oh, not really sure what that is, not heard of it. So it's kind of one of those things that's I don't want to say it's a buzzword because it's so much more than that, but it's an incredibly cool topic that is really impactful and obviously really detrimental if that psychological safety is missing.
Yeah, no, completely understand that, and I think it probably has a big part to play in the bigger topic that we're going to be talking about in terms of the
Yeah,
success of this, right?
yeah.
So I won't go into too much. He's meant to be quick fire. Um, so, what's one piece of recent learning that everyone who is listening to could benefit from?
Um, what have I done recently? Do you know what? I've done some coaching recently. I did it with Ali Stewart and co, and it's something that I've done various different coaching skills lessons over the years, and it's not something I've ever felt truly comfortable with. And actually, this session I did 2 days, really practical, but really going through the fundamentals as well. And actually, again, just looking at the benefits and how easy it can be to do it badly, but the real impact if you're able to just nail that really good question and kind of really tease out that hidden meaning behind it. So I think if anyone's thinking about exploring coaching, I really would recommend trying to do and absorb as much as you can about it, because it is something that I think you need to find your own style with. You need to find what works for you. And so, you can do a course and you kind of think, oh, that sounds great in theory, but in practice, I'm not sure I'd say that, or I'm not sure I'd feel confident enough to do that. So I think it's about kind of finding that style that works for you, but still hearing that person on the other end. So yeah, I think anyone that's interested in coaching, just go for it, because it's a really, really good skill to be able to have.
Yeah, I think it's also one of those ones. I think when I've done coaching, you have to leave your ego at the door and go in and do the role play and get really immersed and try to,
Yeah,
some of that kind of practical process that you go through could be really helpful in actually making it real in your workplace or with a colleague, whatever the
yeah,
example you're in. So yeah,
yeah,
okay, coaching,
absolutely.
brilliant. One thing, this one's a big one, Heather. So, one thing you wish you'd known earlier in your career that you'd bank now if you were starting again.
You know what? I wish I'd got into L&D sooner. I absolutely love it, and it's something that I kind of bobbed around a little bit and kind of did some jobs and worked in retail for a long time. And I remember sitting there thinking when I was the manager and I was sitting there and I was training people, and I was thinking, God, I love the training part of this. I wish I could just do that as a job. And I didn't know that it was a thing and that I could do that as a job. So actually, it's something that I wish I'd just known about sooner. I wish more people kind of talked about L&D and the impact and how really fulfilling it can be. And I think even when I was a child, I was thinking about, oh, I would love to be a teacher. I'm not sure I want to be in charge of 30 kids though. And actually, I can be a bit of a teacher, but for adults rather than children. So actually, I think it's just raising the visibility of L&D, and that is a career pathway. I think a lot of people end up just falling into it and then loving it. And it's something that, yeah, I think we could do a little bit more to kind of celebrate. Actually, this is a really rewarding career path, and it makes people's life at work so much better and has such a good, impact to people. So I think that's something that I wish I'd known 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's easy to look back on your earlier career and wish you'd be where you are now, but I imagine there's lots of learning and I guess context that you probably bring into your role now that benefits your L&D career. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're right, and obviously we're both in the L&D space, so passionate about it, but certainly championing the L&D role and its impact that it can have on the organisation and our people as a whole. So that probably nicely leads into another area that can have a huge impact on people, and also a topic I think for L&D that I imagine has been explored by some, but may not be massively explored by others. And so it's probably good to start with understanding from your perspective, Heather, personal power and the momentum mindset. What does it really mean? Could you give us a bit of a definition and a kind of an overview of what it means?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think for me, and it's important to state, up front, that actually it's not about you being in that position of power. It's not about authority. It's about embracing your uniqueness. It's about really harnessing how you feel, what your strengths, what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, and then thinking about, actually, how can I get that mindset? How can I help my brain overcome that imposter syndrome, or nervousness, or whatever it might be, and actually thinking about trying to kind of change that mindset by really envisioning a time where you felt powerful or confident, or it might even just be calm or in control, and actually really thinking about, how can I overcome those nerves? And sometimes nerves obviously can be a good thing, and they kind of power you to do really, push you out of your comfort zone. And I'm a big one for kind of pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And I think that then I think this is why the personal power has really resonated with me, because it's not about, I'm absolutely the top of this department, or, it's actually about, I've got expert knowledge. I know what I'm talking about most of the time. And it's then about kind of harnessing that feeling and then really kind of stepping into that mindset almost. And I'll give you a nice practical example that I learned about, which is the circle of excellence. And it's really about kind of exactly that, thinking about that mindset. What do I want to be? So do I want to be calm? Do I want to be confident? Do I want to, really make a difference in this meeting or a presentation or whatever it might be? I then envisage that feeling. I've had that before. This meeting, I surprised myself. I was really, commanding, or I really, took control of everything in a positive way. And actually, right, thinking about what that felt like, really trying to harness that, and you almost kind of anchor it on the floor. So you can draw a circle, or you can do kind of a hand gesture, or whatever that might be, and then you step into that circle. So I kind of like to do a bit of a kind of like this motion if I'm doing it, but whatever works for anyone. But it's really trying to kind of get into that mindset, and it really does work. You do feel, that sense of like, oh, okay, yeah, that was good. And I sort of stepped into that circle. And it's almost like, because you've drawn that sort of physical circle on the floor or in front of you, maybe, you can then revisit it and sort of step back into it later. Okay, I'm feeling a bit nervous now, or I'm feeling a bit like, oh, this is slipping away. Right, okay, step back into it, kind of recenter yourself, and off you go. And then it's incredibly impactful. So it's something that I've practiced, and I've told some of my friends to do as well. And it's something that actually I've seen the benefits of doing it. And it's so simple. It's such a simple thing to do, but really can have a really positive impact on your mindset.
Yeah, I love it. I'm excited to explore this more, Heather, and I think for a lot of people, I think this will be a really nice tool to be able to put into their practical toolkit to be able to use. And
Yeah.
I almost see it as a bit like a superpower. You're putting on your cloak. You become that, that version of yourself that you need in that moment. You're able to draw on those powers that you want to be able to
Mm.
take into that moment, which is
Yeah.
nice. Okay, well, look, I think the goal of this session is, and I know that you spent some time thinking about it. We want to give people the ability to explore the topic more, but also give some real examples to be able to go into this. So, it'd be really interested to understand, what does personal power mean to you in like a workplace context specifically, and is there a way that individuals should think about defining it for themselves in terms of the way that they go about accessing it or thinking about it generally?
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, we've talked about it a little bit in terms of what it means, but I think in a workplace context, it is thinking about those situations where maybe you could do with a bit more of a boost. So actually, it's I'm fine in most meetings, but actually, this meeting with one particular person or one particular department it causes me to feel very tense, or I kind of withdraw a little bit. But actually, I really want to put forward my ideas. So it's about then thinking about particular situations or scenarios where it might benefit you, so that actually when you're just going into the meeting, you can do it, and you can do it really quickly as well. So actually doing that circle of excellence, or thinking about, what is it that's actually sort of blocking me, and actually can I really dissect that and think about that in a way that actually I can move past it. But as I said at the beginning, it is kind of about embracing that uniqueness. So it's going to look different for absolutely everyone. But it is thinking about trying to build that self-awareness. So actually, where is a time where I'm dipping? Where is a time where actually I feel very confident, or I feel very in control? And thinking about that growth mindset as well. And I think the growth mindset's, again, a very popular topic, and I'm sure lots of people already know lots about it. And I'm not going to pretend to be the expert about it, but I think it's something that trying to turn those negatives into a positive. So it's about, okay, well, I didn't actually do that well this time. What can I learn from that? So everything is a learning opportunity, and I think that's something I've really learned from my manager. Is it's not a setback, it's not a negative. It's okay, well, this didn't go well, but actually this part did. So why did that go well, and why didn't this bit work so well? And I think that's something that's really hard to start with, but actually once you get into the habit of trying to kind of flip things on its head a little bit, it becomes a bit more of a lived practice. And I think that's something that would really help anyone that's maybe thinking, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about personal power, I'm not sure what that would look like for me. I think it is thinking about what is your mindset. It might already be that sort of more positive side, but it is thinking about, is that something that I'm doing as a practice?
And it feels like, from what you've just said there, then that self-awareness probably plays quite a critical role, and that can also be quite difficult for some people. Potentially, again, if you're more fixed mindset versus growth mindset, often feedback and other elements don't necessarily land quite as well. And so sometimes, for me personally, I think the feedback loop is something that helps with self-awareness. You start to gather a lot more insight into, the impact you have on other people, but also where you sit. But I guess there's also the intrinsic kind of how am I feeling, and you have to have awareness of how you're feeling in that moment to identify possibly which circle of power, power circle you want to
Yeah.
jump into, or
Mm.
which personal power you want to draw on. Is there anything that you've identified or experienced in relation to that self awareness piece that you think would be relevant to talk to?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you've got to have a really good sense of, and a bit of a check in every now and then, just to go, right. How am I feeling about this? Am I feeling okay? Actually, I am feeling okay about this. Okay, what does that mean? Or, oh, I'm not. I'm feeling a bit wobbly. Okay, what does that mean? So actually trying to kind of get to the bottom of that. But I think we're ever evolving. So I think that self awareness is always ever evolving as well. I think it's about trying to be authentic, and authentically you. I think we're
Mm,
very good at kind of reading people, and
mm,
actually you can tell if something's not, you might not know, but you can tell if something's sort of slightly off, or not quite resonating, their body language doesn't match what they're saying, or something like that. Just those really small things you can pick up on and perceive. So I think it is about trying to be authentically you, and understanding that and what that means, is the kind of first step. So I think actually self-awareness is a real fundamental and foundational part of personal power. It really does build on that, and I think that's where you've got to start if you want to start building up some personal power.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to be like in situations. I can't draw on that right now, or I don't feel like I can do it. This is a tool that you can use when you feel like you're in a situation where you are able to use it and you are able to be aware of where you are. I
Yeah.
imagine that in certain stressful situations, it can be quite challenging, probably to bring yourself back to identifying where you are and also wanting to then draw on a personal power or head into a more growth minded situation.
Yeah, we're all human beings at the end of the day. So we, as much as we would like to do things perfectly 100% of the time, that's unfortunately not going to happen. So, and we're very self-critical on ourselves. So actually, it's about kind of giving yourself a bit of a break as well, I think, and actually thinking about kind of, okay, that wasn't 100% perfect, but I tried, or actually 80% of that resonated and that landed. So actually, I think that was a success on the whole. So I think it's about being kind to yourself as well, and actually understanding that you might be running a meeting, for example, and that's not your strength, that's not your passion, but you did it. You can do it. It's just that kind of drains a bit more of my energy. But actually, I think we're all incredibly more capable than we give ourselves credit for. And I think actually it is about kind of trying to push yourself out of that comfort zone to make you think, actually, I really didn't think I was going to be able to do that, but it actually wasn't as bad as I thought.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's. I think we should also say, as you've just outlined there, it's completely okay to be wrong, and I think that's what we've got to, or make mistakes. That's part of the learning journey, and if that's part of the growth mindset, right? If you're able to say, I didn't go quite as well as I wanted it to, but I'm able to reflect and identify something that I can work on for next time, or there's something that I want to add, that I want to try, or I want to test.
Mm.
That's all. As humans, I think that's all we can ask for, that you're trying to go on that journey, and the destination might be different for different people, right, in terms of
Yeah.
the use of this tool. So
Mhm.
um, that probably aligns quite nicely with the idea of vulnerability then, in terms of personal power, because I guess some people could interpret this as kind of power as it's quite well, power is quite
Mm.
a upfront word, I guess. How does personal power coexist with vulnerability, and or can it? And if so,
Yeah.
how do you think it can?
I think it absolutely can, and in terms of the sort of self awareness as well, another kind of foundation. And I think actually, if you think back to the time when you've had a really, really good manager, have they been absolutely perfect and got every step of the way right? No, no, they probably haven't. But they're probably the ones that held their hands up and went, "That's a bit silly. I don't know why I did that," or just kind of showed that vulnerability. And I think that for me, you've got a real strength in transparency. So actually, it really is about trying to not cover everything up and appear like you're perfect. You want to know those mistakes, because if you don't know those mistakes,
Yeah.
that's really dangerous. You're in really dangerous territory. So I think the vulnerability for me plays a big part with psychological safety, in terms of, are you able to say, I've made a mistake, or I'm really sorry, or and also on the other side, it's about, then I've got an idea. Why don't we change that? Why are we doing it like this? If you don't feel psychologically safe enough to do that, then you're not going to do it. You're going to just say nothing and just keep going as it is. And I think it's it's quite brave in a way to be able to do that. It's literally about owning your own power. So it is about kind of what that looks like to you. And that might be really small things that amount to a bigger picture. So I think absolutely vulnerability should and must be part of personal power.
You mentioned something earlier about wanting to be a teacher, but if you think about it, we are just kind of big kids, aren't we? And we're all going on this journey together. So I think there's definitely some, if we can start to build that understanding at an earlier age and try to build it. And I think that goes back to the growth mindset. And actually did another podcast on this just recently about the growth mindset
Mm.
specifically. And, it links back to, there's a study by Carol Dweck on children specifically in the classroom and the way that they think about tests and other interactions. So I think there's definitely this idea. The other bit that I really like is vulnerability and authenticity feel like they're really strongly linked, which goes back
Mm.
to a comment you made earlier too, in terms of, especially as a leader, if you're able to say, I didn't get that right, I'm going to try and work on making this better, or work with you to make this better. I think, if again, it's like leading by example, I guess, is one of the key things that we want to see in that authentic leader ultimately, and I think that's
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah.
So that hopefully nicely leads into a next kind of topic area for us. What do you think gets in the way of personal power for learners and leaders alike? Are there things that you start to see that, as you've worked on this inside your organisation or with colleagues, that starts to get in the way?
Yeah, yeah. I think fear of failure is, and we're all guilty of that from time to time. And same with imposter syndrome. I think it's one of those things that all of a sudden you can be like, "Well, why are they talking to me about that? I don't know." But they've obviously come to you for a particular reason. They obviously think, that you probably know more than you think you do. So actually, there is something that you're kind of putting a bit of a barrier there to yourself. And I think actually it is that lack of psychological safety. It really is that sort of detrimental, that actually it's it's those mistakes that you want to cover up because you don't feel safe enough to disclose it, that actually they're the ones you really need to know about, because how is anyone ever going to learn? None of us do anything right first time every single time. That's how we learn. It's part of the learning cycle. So actually it is about reflecting on it, thinking about what was good, what wasn't good, and giving yourself the time to do that as well. It feels like a bit of a luxury, I think, in this day and age, that you give yourself a bit of reflection time. But actually, especially after kind of, or halfway through big projects, it's absolutely critical that you have that thought space and actually are able to think about, right, okay, I handled that really well, actually. This was really positive. I'd like to do that a bit better in the second half of the project, or whatever it might be. And I think it is about thinking about what's your environment like as well. So actually, and for leaders, is there a good mechanism that you're putting in for your teams as well as for yourself? And I think that's where, for leaders, it's incredibly hard. I think we ask a lot of all leaders and managers at the moment, across all different sectors, that we're expecting them to manage people and then also do a job as well. So actually it's something that is incredibly, it can be a very, very big task for some people, especially if you've got big teams. And actually then it is thinking about, what does that psychological safety look like for me? Who can I talk to? Who do I feel safe with? And equally, is that resonating in the team as well? And if it's not, what can I do about it? How can I foster it a bit more? I think it's incredibly fragile. So it's one of those things that's not like, right, well, we've got it. We all feel great with each other. So that's it. We can kind of move on. It's something that is that kind of ever changing, ever growing. And actually, we need to foster and nurture it. Otherwise, it can slip away, unfortunately.
And I guess the goal of this conversation is obviously to make people aware of the idea of personal power and momentum mindset. Do you think leaders need to play a key role alongside obviously partnering with L&D functions or whoever else in the organisation to get that awareness about this type of, well, obviously psychological safety you've talked about already, but this topic specifically? Do you think is it a case of they need to make them aware, or is it a case of actually leaders just demonstrate it and actually try to show through authentic, practices, through vulnerability, through showing that it's okay to get things wrong, that they're going on a learning journey themselves, that actually if they live it, that this can set the conditions to be successful? Or do you think there needs to be an awareness phase that, again, I don't know, that L&D and leaders together can kind of help in getting
Yeah.
out into the organisation?
Yeah, I think absolutely it's something that I think there is an awareness. I think some people are already aware of it, and I think it is kind of, out there in the space. But actually, I think there is a good portion of people that I think could use that kind of awareness, and that's definitely where L&D come in. And I think it is about realizing that the world of work is changing as well. So actually, what worked 10, 15 years ago maybe doesn't work so much anymore. So it is thinking about changing things up. I think actually role modeling is absolutely one of those fundamentals that are really important in terms of that sort of seen and lived practice that you then try and emanate. But actually, I think it is something that L&D can really help with as well, both with that awareness piece, but also then with continuing it as well, and that kind of, and again, us role modeling it, using things like coaching to try and help that sense of autonomy. So actually, I know that you know the answer, but you don't know that you know the answer. So it's trying to sort of coach that out, so that actually I'm not just telling you, I'm giving you that opportunity to learn it for yourself, because it then hits at a different level, and I think you then retain it a lot more, and are probably more likely to then pass it around to other people and kind of pass it on. So I think that's something that we're really trying to work quite hard on at the university, is that coaching culture. So really trying to build that kind of learning culture, and sort of coaching each other. So it's not just expected from the leaders, it's everyone. We're trying to really build that in, and I think that's something that you need to try and do alongside that continuous development. So it almost goes hand in hand, I think.
Yeah, you've mentioned culture there, so it's hard not to kind of focus on that topic a little bit and explore that. I think one of the biggest challenges for L&D specifically is in creating that kind of continuous learning culture and the ability to access it. There's obviously lots of different experiential learning that's going on that maybe isn't known by leaders or managers. That's happening just out there, but also there's the kind of more formal, how can we institutionalize some of that learning. How do you think organizational culture can limit or empower individuals in relation to personal power and momentum mindset?
Yeah, I think it's such a big topic, isn't it? I think it's one of those things that actually, it almost needs to be like a bit of a secret ninja, where you're sort of spoon feeding learning without them kind of knowing it. So it's not just, right, you want to do X, well, I'm going to send you on a training course. I think, again, the world of work has changed, and if you want to learn a skill, training courses are great and they obviously have their place, but I think there are other avenues that you can have. So actually, e-learning, for example, on the platform, or kind of for us, we've curated a few catalogues, so there's different bits of different types of learning. So I think we've got a bit of a sense of that learners are all different as well. So what might work on a training course for you, it's not going to hit with me, and it's not going to stay. But actually, I could do a 10-minute micro learning, and I've retained that kind of that key information, because I'm a visual person. So actually, that hits a bit differently. So I think in terms of that culture, we've really got to work with the senior leaders to make sure that that learning culture is from the top down, and I think it is at our university. And I think that actually it is about role modeling, but it's about making everyone aware that they've got a part in the culture, and that they've got a responsibility to do that continuous learning as well. And I think it's about giving people a little bit of autonomy, rather than it constantly being L&D to kind of push things on people. Encourage that two-way dialogue. So it is, I know there's a time management course that I could send you on, but is that what you want? Is that what you're wanting to achieve, or is that what you're wanting to learn? Well, actually, no. Actually, the deeper issue is this. And so I think it is about trying to get L&D into as many departments as possible, and just talking to them to just say, what do you want to see? What can we help you with? Because we're as much as we'd like to be, we're not psychic, and we can't, 100% foresee that this team needs this, but this team needs that. So actually, it's about trying to get that kind of almost like learning in the flow of work. And I think that's where Calidus has really helped us, because actually we've been able to do that. So actually it is something that's, I've got an issue with this. Okay, we've got a little e-learning on this, or we've integrated the LinkedIn learning so you can access it through here. So it's nice for staff that they can access it in one place. But it's not just the mandatory stuff. It is stuff that they can access at different times when they actually need it as well. So I think it's for the L&D professional, it's about having lots of things in your toolkit to try and offer at different times. And that's an incredibly hard position to be in sometimes, because I'm sure everyone across the sector is, feeling the pinch at the moment in terms of budget. So it is then about actually what can we do that's, really cost efficient, but then trying to help as many people as possible and really help them on their sort of learning journeys and their career.
Yeah, I think meeting people where they work is absolutely critical, as you say. And I think one thing you mentioned though right at the start, and I'm going to bring you all the way back, is that kind of leadership role, moral modelling, which I'm really interested in. How do you make that? How do you make that visible to the rest of the organisation, or how do you make your kind of learning culture visible? Are there things? Is it a case of? Is it like almost like this? Is there a marketing campaign that goes alongside it, and there's a lot of information that's distributed to the organisation around the kind of areas of focus, what you're trying to promote? Obviously, you're very visible by going around to all the departments, speaking to people and gathering insights, which is a fantastic part of the culture building process and showing that you care, you want to listen, you want to be able to drive relevant learning interventions to be able to support your people. But is that, what I guess from a leadership perspective, is there anything interesting that you're doing that people could maybe be interested in pinching? Or is there anything from a visibility perspective that's really working well for you?
So one session that we had was Tom from Psych Safety, so again psychological safety. He came in and did a sort of half a day session with them, and that's something that certainly in the 5 and a bit years that I've been here, I've not seen something like that happen to that extent, where it was lots and lots of people, and it was really hammered home that actually this is an incredibly important topic for the university. But yeah, I think just kind of referencing it. So I've seen her referencing different sessions that we've done with her in various different meetings. And I think that kind of lived behaviour, it's like, oh, you're going on training courses, or maybe I should. And I think then that kind of does send a really positive message. But I certainly think it's something that we could probably be a bit more visible about. And it's something that I would like to see a lot of the senior leadership team on more of the courses, to see what we do and kind of see what staff are experiencing as well, and see where they think maybe the gaps are or what could be improved upon as well, because we're always open to feedback to try and improve things. And we're not a static thing, we're very much year on year trying to do different things. And obviously AI is a massive topic, so trying to kind of think about what that looks like at the university and how we get that onboarded to staff, and kind of what that looks like for us, because obviously for us it might look very different to what it would look like at another institution, or another organisation. So yeah, it is something that I think is a tricky thing to do in terms of that visibility, but I think Jane is doing a good job at kind of role modelling that at the moment, and we're seeing that that's got some positive results.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I think you're right. It's an all of us activity creating the culture, isn't it? It's not just L&D in isolation. It's not just managers. It's not just the leadership. It has to be an all of us
Yeah.
approach. And I think that's where it probably lands the best. And you have a real, and I guess being part of a learning institution probably also helps with that in that respect.
Yes, yeah, I think it does. To be fair, I think it does, being in the educational sector, but also I think actually just us being able to get the learning management system to invest in that, in terms of actually being able to have that for our staff, I think shows a really positive step that we do support it, because it could be just right, you need to do these e-learning modules, but it doesn't need to look nice, or it doesn't need to be easy to use. And actually we've invested in that, and I think actually that's something that goes a long way to I'm hoping to staff that actually we do care about their learning, and we do care about what they're going to encounter on a day-to-day basis, and trying to give them the skills to manage it in the best way possible.
Yeah. Not to jump away from culture, it's obviously very critical in terms of this whole piece around personal power and momentum mindset. We talked a bit about psychological safety. I know you've sounds like you've recently been doing some training on it too, which is obviously pertinent. Is there anything more about the role that psychological safety can play in personal power and momentum mindset that you'd like to share?
I think there is absolutely tons out there in terms of psychological safety, and I probably could talk about it for most of the day. But as I mentioned previously, Tom from Psych Safety he came and did our sort of train the trainer session last June, and that still really sticks with me. And I think that's something that shows that it was a really good session. So again, if anyone's interested in kind of exploring it, he's got a really good website, and he thinks about, doing talks, webinars. He's got resources on his website and all of that sort of thing, and obviously we'll come and sort of facilitate sessions as well. But I think he's so knowledgeable about it that you just get really passionate about it because he's so passionate about it, and that kind of does rub off on you. But there's so much out there, and I think, like I said at the beginning, it's something that is becoming bigger and more visible. So I think if you're not aware of it too much, or you think you could brush up a bit more, then there's loads out there. But yeah, I would recommend Psych Safety because they are incredibly insightful in that area.
We'll make sure we put a link to Tom's website when this
Oh,
podcast
thank you.
goes live, so
Yeah.
people can access that. For people listening, that'd be good. So, appreciating our time together, it probably is good to get a bit more practical, maybe in terms of how L&D can create an environment that helps unlock personal power in others.
Mhm.
Is there anything specifically that's jumping out at you? I know we've talked a bit about coaching. We've probably talked about learning as well. Is there anything that you would like to share in relation to how L&D can create the environment that makes this really land and unlock personal power for others?
Yeah, I think it's just about creating those spaces, and something that we've noticed over the last year or so is actually it doesn't even necessarily need to be on a topic. Just getting people together for a bit of networking. We've got three different campuses, two in Surrey and one in Kent. So we're quite spread out, and people don't often get to sort of go to different campuses and that sort of thing. So actually just trying to build that networking up. I think we've all got into a little bit of and I'm not saying us particularly, but I think everyone has got into a bit of a silo working since COVID, and it's kind of head down. This is my little bit, and this is what I do, and I don't necessarily work too much with other teams, other departments. And I think it's trying to, and it's hard, but trying to break that silo working. And it isn't about, right, let's just randomly do a project with marketing. It's about then having those networking sessions so something comes organically. And I think it's almost about not having an agenda, or maybe having an incredibly loose agenda that actually then really helps that conversation, and then those ideas bounce around. I think if it feels too forced, you're a bit like, why are we here? I'm really busy. I don't know why we're doing this. So I think it's trying to make the time for people and the space to be able to do that.
And when you say that, is that the space to then practice trying to go into in those moments where you want to maybe draw on a personal power, or you want to walk into your circle, that you've got the opportunity to do that? Or is it more just about the fact that you've made those connections, there's a more of comfortableness that you can draw on those personal powers to go in
Yeah.
in those relevant moments?
Yeah. I mean, certainly for me, I would probably be doing that circle of excellence before I did the first one. And then when I've got to know people and I've kind of made those connections, and now, oh, I know so and so from here, and I know so and so from there. Oh, I need to speak to someone in finance. Oh, I know they might not be the right person, but I know someone there. So actually, that can help direct me better. I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I think it's a good way to, especially if you're introverted, to push yourself out of your comfort zone, use that circle of excellence. And then afterwards, it's good to just kind of then build those connections and have that more meaningful belonging at work. And I think that's really important. And the day where you walk down the hall and you kind of know lots of people and you're saying hello to people, it feels really good. It feels like, oh, I'm part of it. Like, I'm part of this community. And I think we need to do more of that to try and foster that more, because I think it is something that's incredibly important.
Yeah. And so helping team members, colleagues, people out there listening, what role can coaching or training play in helping people get there?
I think, again, creating that safe space, but creating the awareness as well. And I think just being visible that we're doing these things as well, I think really, really helps. I think coaching especially is something that's so kind of uplifting. And, even if you've just got to one answer yourself through someone else asking you a few questions, you feel great afterwards. Like you really do feel feel powerful. And actually, I think it is something that if we can try and foster more of that and encourage more of that across the university, I think that would be a really, really positive step for us. And I facilitate a few sessions for aspiring leaders. And in my sort of journey of being a facilitator, I've gone from being a trainer, I think, to being quite directive, and these are the answers and this is what we think about XYZ. But actually now it's more about, we've put forward this idea, what do you think? What are your ideas on this? How does this sit with you? And actually I think that is more impactful and powerful in terms of people then being able to engage. And it might not land for them. They might think, I'm not sure about that. But actually, if we can have that discussion, we can talk about it. And actually, now I can see your point of view, or you can now see this perspective. And actually, you can see how in some situations this might work. And actually, you wouldn't have ever explored that. So I think that coaching especially is something that's incredibly powerful to give people some sense of power and actually some confidence in their own ability. Because I think, again, said it at the beginning, but I think we know a lot more and we're more capable than we give ourselves credit for. So that coaching and that kind of teasing those answers out of us that you think, well, I didn't know that 10 minutes ago, but I've come up with the answer. So I'm not quite sure what sort of magic you've just done there, but it's, when you see it done well and right, it's incredible to watch.
Yeah, I think the art of asking good open questions is critical to that, right? Especially in
Yeah.
coaching, making sure you're trying to leave them open-ended, that they have avenues to explore. And I think that, so there feels like there's so many different parts of coaching that you could explore, in terms of, obviously there are models like the Grow model and other different models that you can obviously go and train on and explore. But it always comes back to me, and it sounds like from your perspective, you've gone through a journey of facilitation, experiencing different reactions to it, to your approach. Sounds like, again, that interesting journey from being going directive to coming back to trying to draw out and use probably more open questions to try and draw out people's own perspective and getting to the answer to themselves. You have to go through that kind of experience. I think that if you want to become a good coach, or you want to go through coaching, you have to actively participate and you have to go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really don't, whenever I'm on a session or, sort of run by someone else and they go, right, we're going to do some role play now. Inside, I'm like, no. And I hate role play, but I know that it's really beneficial. And I know that, you can learn theory till you're blue in the face, but actually it's trying it out and it's being able to do it as well as learning those fundamentals that really helps you kind of push it forward and find out what's your style. Find out, actually, I felt really uncomfortable doing that those aren't my questions, that's not how I would talk. Or actually, I surprised myself with that question, that was actually quite insightful. And it's all practice, and it's all something that I say to my kids a lot is practice makes progress. There isn't such thing as perfect. So it's about then trying to it's that journey, and it's just seeing those little steps that you've come a long way, but you've done it one step at a time. And I think that's really, really a good life motto to try and have.
Yeah, it's a growth mindset, growth minded approach, isn't it? Do you think digital learning can play a part, or is it always about your personal approach to it and your personal learning?
I think it absolutely can play a vital part, otherwise we wouldn't have it, to be completely blunt. I think it absolutely can play a part. I think there are things, so for example, as a university, we need to have safeguarding. We need to have that as a consistent message. We need to make sure that absolutely everyone that's on campus has seen it, done it, knows it. And actually that's a really good way of having that consistent message. We can see that people have done it. We can see if someone hasn't done it. We can see if they're halfway through it, all of that sort of thing. Whereas actually we could hand out a policy, we could hand out any number of things, but then you don't know whether what they've retained, what they've actually done, whether they just got someone else to sign it for them and they've not even seen it. You just don't really know. So I think it plays a part as well in that blended learning. So I think that's where we're starting to explore it now. And I don't think we've actually reached the full potential of what we could do with our platform. I think there's a lot more growth that we can do with it. So I think using it as part of a program. So actually, we want you to do this e-learning, then you'll come and do this maybe face-to-face session, then you might have a webinar, then we might do a focus group or that sort of thing. So trying to do lots of different elements on a program rather than just relying on here's a time management course, because I think I think we need to start thinking about that using technology to work for us rather than us doing everything. So I think it is a more holistic approach, and I hope that it lands with a lot more people, because actually I really like doing that practice bit, or actually I really loved the focus group and just sort of talking about it and kind of trying to touch all those different bases of different learning styles.
Yeah, and there always are a lot of learning styles, especially in an organisation of your size. I think there's also the idea of knowledge to skills as well that's now coming in, and obviously use of platforms to be able to support that. But I think we've been focused a lot on kind of sharing knowledge, but then the next step is turning that into something that is, a competency or capability that you can take forward and a skill that you can use. Do you think you can measure? Do you think you can measure growth in personal power, or do you think you should measure growth? Maybe is that actually something that we should be considering as organisations?
It's a great question. I don't know how you would necessarily measure it, because it's almost, I guess you could kind of through evaluations. So how did you feel at the start? How confident were you at the start? How confident were you at the end? And hopefully you see an improvement or an enhancement in that skill. So I think it is important to do that evaluation, but I think when it's something almost immeasurable like psychological safety or that kind of personal power, I think it is quite tricky to measure that and sort of see it. But hopefully you will see it in terms of people being promoted and kind of going for more opportunities, and kind of just that thinking outside the box and that sort of creativity and innovation. And I think if we don't have that good sense of psychological safety or personal power, I'm not going to put forward an idea. It might be the best idea in the world, but I'm just going to keep it to myself until I'm not there anymore. And I think actually it's one of those things that we need to try and counter that by trying to tease it out. But I think it is quite a tricky thing to measure. I think the only way that comes to mind is that sort of evaluation of different things. And I think that is important. And I think it's something that I recently did an apprenticeship in L&D, and that's something that they talked about a lot. And then sort of looking at our own practice and thinking we could definitely do this in a lot of other ways, and kind of exploring that a lot further. So I think it is something that helps us grow, helps us improve. So I think that is something that you could identify as a measure in terms of that confidence. But it is just people living it and kind of going and doing it as well.
Yeah, I think it kind of links back to there's so many different elements to this that make this potentially valuable to people and to the organisation as a whole, right? And it feels like you've got elements of self-awareness, understanding that you've got to work on. There are elements of leadership, leading by example. There are elements of your culture that all of those bits fit into too. There are elements of the facilitating the environment and the safety, psychological safety specifically, to allow people to do that. It just feels like there's so many different elements here that actually, if you get all those right, people are going to be able to collaborate. They're going to ramp up their curiosity. They're going to share more. The amount of experiential learning that happens between people will increase. It feels like there's so many elements of this that why wouldn't we be focusing on or trying to work on at an organizational level? I guess it leads me to ask you, as we wrap up, is there anything that you feel like for people just wanting to start, is there somewhere to focus, or is there one practical piece of advice you want to leave people with?
I just want to pick up on what you were saying about kind of peer learning, and I think that's a really good way of doing it. So it's not, again, all on the leaders or all on the managers to try and role model it and do all of that, but actually thinking about everyone's responsibility and role within it. We can all absolutely build our own personal power, but we can also have really detrimental effects to other people's personal power if we're rolling our eyes in a meeting, or we're kind of, dismissing an idea completely out of hand. So I think actually trying to just bear in mind what your actions could potentially be doing, as harmless as you think they might be, and actually just thinking about everyone's role and responsibility in it, I think, and that actually we can build each other up, and I think that's so much nicer an environment than everyone kind of out for themselves and it's all very cutthroat. And I understand that, you know, that's absolutely not what the university is like, and I couldn't work in that kind of environment for more than a day, I don't think. But yeah, I think just trying to be kind to yourself and kind to others, and actually supporting those ideas, supporting that psychological safety, so that actually when that idea comes in, there might be 5 really bad ideas, but then that one idea that just comes and changes your whole way of working because it's so much easier or streamlines your process or something like that. So actually it's about trying to just, you know, really support each other, even if you think, oh, I'm not sure about that idea. But, you know, actually it's about, you know, how can you tactfully, you know, deal with that and then not dismiss it. So they're like, well, I'm not going to share anymore. Thanks. That's it. You're going to get, you know, the main work. That's what you're going to get from me, and nothing else. So I think actually fostering that environment for each other, and all knowing that we're all going through quite a tough time at the moment in terms of, you know, lots and lots of organisations are facing a lot of change. So actually just even being more kind to each other if you can, if possible.
Brilliant. Well, look, Heather, it's been a real pleasure to be able to explore personal power and the momentum mindset, and lots of useful insights into how people can explore the topic. Thank you for your time, and yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much.